I'd like to welcome you all to this episode of In Conservation With. My name is David Lindo, and I'm also known as the Urban Birder. I've got a really special guest today, Lev Parikian, and I hope I've pronounced your surname correctly.
You have, and you've got a lot better than many people. I'm usually happy as long as there's just one K in it, and that was brilliant.
Thank you. The thing I want to talk about, really, I mean, what I want to put into the Zoomers listening, your mind, is that, you know, it's funny because, like, for example, it's now sort of mid to late July. And for me, because I feel so connected to nature through birding and other things, I feel that there's a change in the atmosphere, and I feel this expectancy. I've noticed in my life, for example, that I can't wake up between sort of early June and mid-July to save my life. Yet from mid-July through to November, I'm awake at the crack of dawn because I'm expecting migration. I feel very connected to this whole excitement of seeing, you know, new things passing through my area. And it's interesting that I feel that, but how does that compare to how someone who's not interested in wildlife, what do they feel? You know, so this is part of the reason why we're talking tonight, because Lev has written a book entitled Into the Tangled Bank, in which he discusses his views on our connectivity to nature. And before we go any further, I must also thank Leica Nature and Birding. I think that's it's Leica, any Leica cameras, and also to King's Place Music Foundation, who are sponsoring this as well as part of their Nature Unwrapped season. So, Lev, firstly, before we even talk about your thoughts on how we do or don't connect to nature, tell us a bit about yourself, because obviously many people may not have heard of you. You're sitting in the Isle of Wight at the moment, aren't you?
I am. Yeah, we've come away for a couple of weeks. The moment lockdown eased here, we took the opportunity to snaffle a little holiday with my family, my wife and my son, who's 15, and we live in London, which of course you know all about, the urban area. My day job is, well, it's not really a day job because I'm an orchestral conductor, so a lot of my work is conducted during the evenings, but I also write, and this is my third book, Into the Tangled Bank. So I have a particular outlook on nature, simply because, unlike a lot of the people that you've had on your excellent channel, David, I think I'm not an expert. You've had some really fantastic and informative people who know an awful lot, and they've immersed themselves into nature, and they've been inspired by it for their whole lives. And I'm not like that, really. I was a very keen bird. Would I call myself a birder? Probably a bird watcher at the time, because I didn't go out so much. But I grew up in Oxfordshire in a small village, and when I was a kid, I was absolutely engrossed by the natural world, but especially birds. And I think my gateway into that was, I don't know if you're the right age for this, David, but the Reader's Digest book of birds, that fantastic...
Well, I'm far too young, Lev, far too young.
Fantastic illustrated sort of coffee table book, which had, I think the illustrations caught my attention, and the distribution maps and all of that sort of magical world. And I wanted to see these birds. So I spent a lot of my time wandering around the village, either seeing them or pretending I'd seen them. I was a terrible stringer at the time. Anyway, I was obsessed with it, and I actually gained quite a lot of knowledge from reading these books and going out and pestering my mum to drive me to places, and so I could see the birds. And then, as I got older, I think in my teenage years, other interests came in, and somehow it just slipped out of my grasp. And I moved to London to pursue a musical career, and that occupied my mind for quite a long time. And it was only I suppose in my mid-40s, about 10 years ago, that I started to notice birds again, particularly birds. And it wasn't that I was completely immune to the natural world. I mean, I didn't go around with a bag on my head, but I wouldn't have gone out to seek it out in the way that I absolutely would now, in a natural way. So I got bitten by that bug again over the last decade. The book before Into the Tangled Bank that I wrote was the story of that return to birding. It was called Why Do Birds Suddenly Disappear? And it was, you were talking about being competitive a minute ago. It was a story of the return of that passion and my setting myself a target of seeing 200 in a year, which was a kind of what I felt like a fair target, something that was in Britain, not unattainable, but achievable by somebody who was probably doing the wrong things all the time. And then following on from that, I kind of realized that there were other things. I mean, I'd noticed as I was going out to see birds that, especially at this time of year, July and August, I wasn't seeing many birds, but I was seeing a lot of butterflies. So I started to, get books about that and read a bit about them, and so on. And my wife is a garden designer, so I've been getting interested in plants. And so it's from that quite narrow perspective, it's branched out over the last 4 or 5 years. And even though I'm a beginner in most areas of the natural world, I'm extremely enthusiastic. So the book, Into the Tangled Bank, really came from wanting to write about that journey, as it were, but also something I've noticed, which is that when we're out observing nature, a lot of people focus really only on the nature, as if there's a separation between us, the humans, and the nature here. Whereas I found it very interesting watching birders while they were birding, especially if there weren't any birds around. A twitching line is an obvious example, or even any bird hide anywhere, or just walking around somewhere on a hill or heath and running into people and seeing what perspective they had on the natural world, where in the spectrum of nature engagement they were, whether they were complete beginners, oblivious, just didn't care about it, or people like you who have devoted their lives to it, are very expert and will spend your lives communicating to people their love of nature. So that's where it came from, really.
I mean, your journey, to be honest, is very similar to many people, including myself, because, I started off with this inbuilt interest in natural history, which actually started with insects and then got into birds. And then by the age of 13, when I started secondary school, I went to a Catholic boys' school. Suddenly I was introduced to women I didn't know they existed. They existed. Music, drink, all kind of like heady mix. And birding took a back seat, even though it was always there. It took a back seat. And, I think like you my reblossoming happened when I was about 19, actually, because I kind of had 5 years when I was glad I did this, because I became more rounded. But because otherwise I'd be
It took me a bit longer.
Yeah, but I mean, it's better late than never. And I think also it's to do with, getting on with your life. And I think also, if you become more rounded, then it makes you appreciate things better. Otherwise, you just become a complete and utter anorak, and you probably be still in your parents' bedroom, in terms of not their bedroom, but your bedroom in their house.
No disrespect intended to anybody who lives like that. Just as
you know what I'm saying, just not coming out at all, just basically sitting in your anorak.
Yeah. I do think it's interesting, though, just to pick up on that whole thing of being around it and having a view of something other than that narrow interest, I think is pretty important, and it helps you to put things into perspective. And I think some of the most interesting people I've met have been those ones who have been able to talk about other stuff, and it's not just the kind of the birds.
Yeah, because to be honest with you, as much as I love birds, I find it so dull being with people who just talk about birds all day long. I remember going to a party once, and I wanted to go to a party to relax, and some guy just hooked onto me. He realised who I was, and he was just offloading all night, and he was boring the hell out of me. And he was talking about birds, what I like, but it was just too much because there was nothing else that was coming into the mix at all, you know.
But also, absolutely, I think we probably all experience, and we hope that we're not that person. But I think it's also the fact that it needs to be a conversation, doesn't it? It needs, it needs to be. So I saw this today, and have you seen that? And what do you think of this? Rather than I saw this and this and this and this and this and this and this. Okay, that's all very good, but do I get a word? You know, it's a lecture, not a conversation.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was something that really struck me.
Well, he was doing just that, just offloading. So there was no room. I mean, if I said something, he'd had to seen it or do more. But let's actually go. By the way, before I actually ask you this question, I must say that Susie Buttress loves your T-shirt, by the way.
Thank you, Susie. Hello, Susie. Lovely to see you, or not see you, but I can see your name. Shall I do the T-shirt?
You stand up, yeah.
Okay, so this is the thing. I was a few months ago. I think it was quite near the big. I can't remember when it was. I don't. Well, actually, I do draw a bit. I started drawing for the book, which we might talk about in a bit. But I have these ideas for silly cartoons or whatever. And something completely fully formed into my head. And it was this diagram here, which I'm not sure if you can see it. It's called the Trajectories of Birds. And at the bottom, you can see, a feral pigeon pootling along there on a little wavy line. And then you go up to a skylark twirling up into the sky there. And then the next one up is a green woodpecker with its bouncing trajectory that we all know. And then there's a blue tit going bim, 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 bim. And a blackbird going skiddly-dip. And right at the very top is a peregrine, and the line goes down all the way down to a little explosion of death there where it meets the trajectory of the feral pigeon. So I jotted this down on a piece of paper. And as Susie knows, I'm a very keen Twitter user. So I jotted this down, put it on the thing, and as sometimes happens, it went viral. So kind of somebody picked it up, somebody with a lot of followers retweeted it, and within a day it had 2,000 retweets or whatever. And, it was just, and people saying, "This is brilliant, you should put it on a T-shirt." So I did, that's the story of the T-shirt. And honestly, in this lockdown, because as I mentioned, my musical thing, my day job, I have to dress up a little bit. I'm standing in front of musicians and waving my arms, and I've got to be a little bit presentable. But since lockdown, I've basically gone on a rotation of this T-shirt and not much else, because I don't have to dress up. So thanks for mentioning it, Susie. They're available on my website. You said recently.
In terms of music, just out of interest, how does that influence your natural history life, your natural history self?
That's really interesting. I think when I came back so there's a couple of aspects to it. When I came back to birding, 5, 6, 7 years ago, one of the things that I noticed, as most birders do, is that you quite often don't see them, but you hear them. And so I thought, okay, I must get up to speed with birdsong, which I don't think I'd really done as a kid. So I got those CDs, the British Library CD box set, which has them all. I didn't know about Zeno Canto then. I was on a CD and I was listening to them on the train and things. And I thought, it's easy. I'm a musician. I'll be able to pick this up really easily. And I realised quite quickly that it was much, much harder than I thought it was going to be. And I got to grips with it. I think it's because the language is different. It's like learning a foreign language. If I was trying to learn Japanese from scratch, it would take you'd have to learn a whole new vocabulary completely. So, I've got a lot better at recognising birdsong as I've practiced and been fascinated by the sounds. But it's not as intuitive as I think you might think. But also especially with the classical music, which is what I'm into as my living, I do find myself drawn to music that in some way will represent nature or be in touch with it. I mean, the most obvious example I can think of is either Vaughan Williams's Lark Ascending, which is a famous classical piece representing the lark in flight, and it's a brilliant rendition of that. Or another one is Beethoven's Pastoral Symphony, which again, it's in some ways the slower movements of that are like a musical representation of being in the countryside. Complete with birdsong near the end of the slow movement, but he puts a nightingale in, the quail, and a cuckoo. So I think there's definitely a connection. Certainly in the classical field. I know less about other areas, I guess.
Yeah, it's interesting because when I go to Serbia, my friends there, my Serbian birding friends there, they liken the song of the ortolan bunting to the beginning of Beethoven's Fifth.
Yes.
So have a listen, see if you can see the connection. I looked at your book, very interesting and fascinating book, by the way, and I liked what drew me into it was your introduction when you talked about the fact that you were on your stomach looking at a butterfly and you saw a young kid with perhaps a father, and you really wanted them both to come and share this joy with you, but then reality stepped in.
Yeah, I'll just tell you, it's giving away the beginning of the book, I guess, but I think so. It came from, I'd had the idea, and I was talking to the publishers, what am I going to write the book about? And I'd had the idea that we would do it, this thing I talked about, which is humans being part of nature and how we are in it, and how the huge spectrum of the way people in general, not just enthusiasts, behave in the natural world or have their relationship with it. But I was looking for a way in. It was such a huge subject, it's very broad, and I wanted to just narrow it in. I was looking for a way in, but I kind of had ideas going around in my head. So I walked over the road opposite my house in South London, very urban area, nothing special, to post a letter. And it was almost exactly 2 years ago, so it's peak butterfly season. And on the corner opposite our house, it's quite a scubby, used to be quite a dumping ground, because the bit behind it is wasteland, and it's been fenced off very badly, and the pavement is quite big, but it's quite a really good area for people to dump old mattresses and bicycles and prams and old IKEA bookshelves. But a few years ago, somebody had the idea to spruce it up a bit and to do some planting, lift some flagstones and put some plants in to make it just a more attractive area. And they got the approval from the council, and it was all done, it wasn't guerrilla gardening, it was all organised. And my wife, who's a garden designer, did the planting plan. Anyway, so there were some plants there, and this butterfly came in. And it was just low down on the plant. I could see it was a common blue, which is, a really lovely, beautiful thing. And it was sitting there having a drink. So I got down and had a look at it because I wanted to get closer to it, and it was low down. So I was lying on my stomach, just getting the phone and just seeing how close I could get to it and examining its really, its delicate colouring. And I saw this little girl about 4 or 5 years old, running up the pavement towards me, obviously drawn to this weird man lying on the pavement. And behind her was, I presume, her father, head in phone, the way I think a lot of people, and I've done it, I'm guilty as charged, on the way to the station, head in phone, just oblivious to everything. And so the girl stopped in front of me a couple of yards away, looked at me, and there was just the narrowest window of opportunity where I could have seized a little moment and said, "Hey, excuse me, sir, just look at this beautiful butterfly." And I realised how strange I looked, and I didn't quite have the gumption to do it. So I let the moment pass, and then he looked up from his phone, saw that she was standing next to this weirdo, and called her across and said, "Come on, pop it, let's go," and she ran off. So as well as kind of regretting that I could have sparked an enthusiasm in the little girl, I suppose, she might have seen a butterfly and then gone, "Oh, next time, seen another butterfly," and an enthusiasm could have been sparked. But it struck me that there were 3 points on the spectrum. There was the guy who was walking through life oblivious to it. The stuff in his phone might have been interesting, but he was oblivious of the world around him. There was me, the really zealous new convert, and there's nothing more zealous than a new convert, is there? You get new enthusiasm and you want to tell people about it, and I go around grabbing people and saying, "Look at that! Look at it! There's a peregrine up there, or swifts, or whatever it is." And then in the middle, there was the girl who was nothing yet. She was curious about stuff and could have been pushed either way, sort of blank slate. And so I thought that was my starting point. And I could take it from there and examine these different strands in various ways. So, and I thought it also quite a nice story to start the book with.
Yeah, it's a great story. It's funny how we are, well, I'd say we are, I mean, collectively we are slaves to our phones. I remember once being in London and seeing a guy talking on the phone, and he tripped. And as he's falling, he was continuing talking as if nothing was happening until he hit the deck. And I'm thinking, whoa, this is what the world has come to.
I remember it as well. Sorry, I was on Lindisfarne a few years ago, and there was a little murmuration. It was, not a massive murmuration, but it was probably 15,000 starlings coming in to roost. And it's a sight, isn't it? And this guy came past, on the phone, completely oblivious. And they were making a racket as well as coming in from all parts of the island. And he just, why are you just, they're right there. And you're obviously, what are you doing on this island if you're not interested? Anyway, there you go.
I think I might as well ask you the burning question, the white elephant in the room. How do the average person, or how does the average person relate to nature in your view?
Well, it's interesting because I think there are several ways to answer this. As I mentioned, it's a spectrum. And I think those of us who are on the more engaged part of that spectrum, whether we're experts at the top and really engaged, or enthusiasts like me, learning and beginning to get really enthused. I think it's easy to assume that people in general are like us because we're interested in it, therefore other people must be interested in it. And I've got a horrible feeling that large portions of the population aren't as engaged as we think they are, or as knowledgeable as we think they are. So I think there is that aspect. I think there's also an aspect in that we are engaged with it, but at a one remove. And I think let's talk about it now, which is this thing of TV programs, which are brilliant. Whether it's the obvious ones of David Attenborough, Planet Earth, Blue Planet, all of those things, or the more, you had Gillian, didn't you, the other day? So Springwatch, for example, is another way of engaging. And those are probably two of the main ways. There's the documentary thing, or there's the real life. And loads of people watch those programs. Loads of people especially watch the Planet Earth type documentary. And I have as well, and I watch them avidly and with, on tenterhooks, especially in the last few years. I think these programs have become more like drama series. So there'll be a narrative. The one I write about is the one that had us on the edge of our seats, which was the iguana versus the racer snakes, which you take it as a piece of filmmaking. It's absolutely stunning. The quality of the picture is amazing. The camera work is superb. The editing is brilliant. The soundtrack is like it's like an adventure movie. It's like a thriller. And you got good guys and bad guys. On this occasion, the iguana was the good guy trying to escape to freedom, and the snakes were the bad guys. And they could have presented it like, okay, so the snakes need a meal. and are they going to get the meal? So these are sort of conscious choices, and I suppose, and I don't want to disrespect them at all, because I think they are incredibly engaging and they're informative and educational and they're really important. But I wonder whether we as the viewers allow ourselves to become sofa nature enthusiasts. You see what I mean? So we watch these programs, and then the real thing, which might be, as you well know, going to a muddy reservoir, looking at a lone shell duck, and a couple of waders come in after a couple of hours, and then it's gone, it's freezing. That disappoints us because it doesn't live up to what we expect from those things. So that's the one aspect. With the Spring Watch thing, I think is in that kind of program is more engaging, isn't it? Because they're kind of reaching out and saying, okay, this is on your doorstep. So it's not just, I think I'm not really saying that one is better than the other, but I'm just interested in that way of engaging. So people will say that they're nature enthusiasts. What does that actually mean? Does that mean that they've watched a lot of documentaries but don't go out and look at the woodlouse on their terrace? And realise that there's a whole world there just on the doorstep. So yeah, I think it's fascinating. I'm yet to come down on one side or the other, really.
Well, for me, as much, I mean, I agree with most of what you say. I think that, these programs are amazing, especially the Attenborough ones that you mentioned. But each time there's a new series, the bar gets higher and higher.
Yeah.
And I fear that it becomes, as you say, as you've intimated, a source of entertainment and with no relevance to real life. And also what makes me scared is the fact that over the years, especially with other channels, it's all about claws, jaws and fangs. If it can't kill you, if it can't maim you, then it's not interesting.
There's that drama that we have. Yeah.
I think we're growing a nation of kids that could potentially be interested in conservation, but in the end, they're thinking, well, there's nothing in England, so it's boring, so I'm moving on. Excuse me. And I think it dulls our kind of let me rephrase this. I think it makes our expectations, management of our expectations isn't good. I mean, I remember being in Sri Lanka a couple of years ago, leading a tour, and I was with my group, and we came across this spider, and I was saying, guys, check this spider out. And it's one of these really big, massive spiders. And I heard an English voice behind me. There was a couple being led by a Sri Lankan. What are you doing, mate? We're watching a spider. Spider? We're going to see the leopard. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because I think people expect to see what they've just seen on TV to be acted out. And I've seen that even in birding. People think that, they want to be seeing a peregrine stooping. Why isn't it doing that? Oh, it's boring. And I think that's the danger. And also, I have a bone to pick with the natural history programming, because I think they missed a massive trick during lockdown, but also generally. And I think that, they are still guilty of not talking to people living in urban areas enough. 82% of people in the UK live in urban areas, yet the programming is always about something which is really remote and, you don't have a chance to see normally. So people think, oh, that's cute, but I'm never going to see that again or whatever in my life. So I'll move on. So that connectivity is gone. And I think they missed the opportunity of creating a bridge, having something that you can see around you. Hey guys, here's a film that I just made of what you can see if you walked out your door now.
Yeah.
And that can link eventually into the David Attenborough programs. So I'm not totally happy. I feel that there is more work that needs to be done to really kind of get people engaged.
Yeah. Absolutely. I think again, in defence of the Attenborough style programs, what they did do, I think after, I can't remember which series it was, but they did do the extra program at the end, showing how much time they spent and how much trouble they went to produce this footage. It wasn't just that they turned up and there it was happening, in front of them. So there is that effort was made, But and I also, I mean, I'm not saying, I think it's yeah, they have a duty to provide that education, but I'd rather have those programs than not have them, if you see what I mean. I think, but the point you made about the urban, obviously that is something that you've devoted your life to, and it's really important that the local patch, and seeing things as fascinating rather than scary. I mean, I had this discussion on my local Facebook group the other day when the flying ants turned up. And of course, there was people saying, "Oh, there's flying ants everywhere. Oh God, my God, I've got to kill them. How am I going to kill them? I've got to kill them. We've got to get rid of them." And there are a few calm voices coming on saying, "Well, you know, giving a bit of perspective on it, saying, A, it's only for one day in the year or two, and B, this is what they're doing, and they're very important, and they're not actually doing you much harm. And comparatively, the harm that we've done to them compared to the harm that they're going to do to us as an inconvenience is it's not even a close contest."
Why do we demonize certain species? I mean, you talked about ants, but I mean, in your book, you made references to bees and how people think, "Oh, bees are lovely. Wasps,
Yeah.
no. Hornets, no." You know,
Yeah, I know.
why is that?
I wonder whether it's, I mean, again, I'm kind of guessing here, but I wonder whether it's something quite deep rooted in our subconscious, which is that we've grown up, you know, we've way back, these things would be potentially dangerous to us. Yeah. So, I mean, it's also handed down from parent to child. So a fear of spiders, for example, is extremely common. Whether it's, you know, arachnophobia is a different thing. I think that's a rare, true arachnophobia, which is a condition. But a general distaste for spiders is extremely common. And yet they are basically, in this country, they're beneficial. Yeah, they're not going to do us any harm. They're more scared of us than we are of them. They will, they'll catch and eat the flies that you complain about as well. So, you know, leave them up. They're not tidy, but in the grand scheme of things, you know, I think we just, I don't know. I think it's perpetuated by people teaching their children that these are bad things.
Also, that, but also it comes. There's a trickle up thing, but there's also a trickle down in that the media are so guilty of
Don't get me started.
of demonizing certain things. I mean, gulls, for example, every year, you know, I get called up to speak about gulls attacking people. I remember one year, a rhea. So for those who are unfamiliar, a rhea is a flightless bird that's distantly related to ostriches, but they're found in South America and they're quite tall. One escaped in Nottinghamshire, and it was, oh my God, lock your daughters up, you know, get your guns out. I mean, it was just incredible. And I was doing a circuit of BBC radio interviews. David, you know, this is a very dangerous creature, isn't it? You know, and it kind of culminated in a conversation, a very brief conversation with someone from BBC Radio Ulster, who built up this whole scenario. It can kick a man and kill him with one single kick. It's 6 foot tall. It can terrorize, blah, 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 blah. Isn't that right, David? I said, well, actually, no. I said, you know, this bird is, as you said earlier, is more afraid of us than we are of it. And, you know, it will melt away into the background. And interestingly, Seamus, the presenter, interestingly, I said, there's a flock of 150 or so that have been living just north of Berlin for the last 30 years. And to my knowledge, Seamus, not one person has ever even received a scratch. In fact, Seamus, I think that you are more dangerous than a rhea. The phone call ended after 10 seconds.
Oh, God.
Because I wasn't following the demonizing line. And it's just so boring, you know, especially when you know, even I mean, going back to flying ants, I mean, they are totally harmless. I mean, they're part of the food chain. when the flying ants happen, you often look up, you see loads of black-headed gulls feeding on them and starlings. You know, everyone's happy. They do a service for us as well. It's just, as someone mentioned in the chat, it is all about education.
Yeah, it's education of and it's very difficult to know how to, how to approach it without turning into the lectury kind of person. You know what I mean? It's telling people that they're wrong, which people don't like to hear. But you just have to say, look, honestly, it's just look at them. They're amazing what they're doing. You know, to turn that fear of maybe it's the unknown, maybe it's something that we do. The spiders, the obvious thing is that they're very, very fast, and you don't know which direction they're going to run in. So people are kind of scared, and then the urban myths go around that they're going to crawl into your mouth while you sleep, and they're poisonous, and it's just, for God's sake, you know. The false widow spider is the obvious one for that, isn't it? That people go, oh God, it's the most venomous spider in Britain. Yeah, which makes it really not that dangerous to us at all. They're all venomous. That's how they kill things.
I mean, it's ridiculous when they closed that school down a couple of years ago because there was a false widow spider seen in the school. And I'm thinking, if you're going to do that, you might as well close any school down when they see a wasp.
Yeah,
that's far more dangerous than the false widow. We're talking about gardens, actually, because those animals are found in gardens, and it's a good link. You've written about gardens in your book. What is our relationship with our gardens in terms of the natural relationship, the natural world within the gardens?
Well, I think again, it's to do with boundaries and barriers, isn't it? I think there is there's a movement away from this with more and more wildlife gardens coming in, but fundamentally, I think we love nature as long as it signs our terms and conditions. So in our garden, we like to have it the way we like it. And anything that encroaches on that, anything we regard as not a lovely flower, is demonized as a weed. And I think there are good horticultural reasons for that, which is that some of these plants are obvious ones. You know, bindweed is the most obvious one in some ways, is that they do invade and they do take over. So if you want variety in your garden, then the field bindweed or hedge bindweed is probably going to go against that, because it will smother other things that you might want to be seeing at certain times of the year. So there is, and I think there is more education being done and more understanding of the importance of wildlife gardens and how we can build a network of these things if we just encourage certain plants to have their little corner that will bring insects, and bring the insects might then in turn bring birds, and it'll just extend the chain rather than what I regard as something fairly old school nowadays, which is just pesticides, and keeping it all, getting rid of the pests, the things we don't want, and making it all completely tended and beautiful. So, but it is, I think, it's the same as I write about the house being one boundary, and we don't want certain things to come into our house, and then the garden is great, but we don't want certain things to come into the garden. Foxes maybe, because they'll dig up the lawn or whatever it is, and then beyond that, then it can get wilder. So this is speaking all from the perspective as somebody who's privileged to have a garden and to be married to a garden designer who understands all of this stuff much better than I do.
Yeah, because I despair when I go to people's houses and they have astroturf down, for example, and you kind of ask the question, why is that? And often, it's not often, it's always from a point of being totally uneducated on the subject, and it's about, I don't want my kids to get muddy and all that sort of stuff. And the other thing that I can extrapolate from that is the countless arguments I have with people when they turn around and say, oh, there's no small birds in my garden.
Well,
I'm looking at their garden thinking, well, I can see why. There's nothing here for them to be here for anyway.
They
But
have to
of
eat.
course, as humans, we have to use a scapegoat. Oh, it's those bloody magpies, it's the crows, it's the sparrowhawks. Well, actually, no, it's the slug pellets he used to put out. And
Yeah.
now it's the sterile wooden fencing, the astroturf, and the lack of any kind of plants that's going to attract anything.
Yeah,
You know,
I find that magpie thing is a fascinating one, because so we demonize the magpie for, or I don't, but a lot of people do. They demonize the magpie for predating, say, blue tit chicks, yeah, because we don't want to see the fluffy little blue tit chicks die. What we don't demonize are the blue tits that get thousands and thousands of caterpillars to feed to their chicks, which is, they're doing the same thing. They're providing for themselves and for their family, and they're killing something else to do it, which is all the magpie's doing, basically. All right. So, and I'm sure that's something to do with fluffiness as well. We see, people reaction to caterpillars is wriggly, wriggly. Blue tits, oh, little floof. When caterpillars turn into butterflies, we go, oh, lovely, beautiful butterfly. But then if they turn into moths, they go, oh, drab old moths, going to eat your clothes. The number of people who think that all moths, all 2,500 species of them that are, or whatever it is, are found in the UK, are going to eat your clothes. I would suspect it's a terrifyingly high percentage of people who will think that. Oh, moths eat your clothes, they're horrible. They're also drab, and they flutter around in the lighting. So again, it's education, and I suppose, and if I'm just going to bring this back smoothly to the book, what I want to do, and I've learned so much from experts, and I'm always fascinated. And I think seeing and talking to people who really know their stuff, people like you and dozens of others, who really, it's so on top of it, is inspirational, and that's what gets me going. So, I really want to learn that. He's explained that so brilliantly. But I think there's a danger, and I found this when I was coming back to birding. I felt quite intimidated by, it's my own stuff, I think, but my lack of knowledge. I kind of, at a certain level, felt I can't quite join this club yet because I don't know enough. And I don't think that birders give that vibe off deliberately. Some of them do, I think, but a minority. Mostly, it could be my own stuff, but it's just there's a feeling that it's a bit of a closed thing, and I wonder if you've experienced that as well.
I think there is elitism in birding, without a doubt. I've experienced it, for example, in London, because I used to at one point be the chairman of the London Bird Club. And the resistance I got from the elite for wanting to become more inclusive, for wanting to talk more about birds that people can see in the bird report and not talking and focusing on rarities, was unreal. There was actually a massive kind of, load of people against me, really quite angrily against me for even daring to suggest that. And my response was, well, once you're dead, who's going to be reading this particular publication? No one. We need to be encouraging new people. And I'm saying that most people are not like that, but there is an element of that. And I've noticed it in my work, because some people feel that urban birding, or talking about urban birding, is not real birding. For example, I launched a book in Germany, and the publisher approached a group of people running a bird observatory, and they said, "Oh, we don't want to talk to him or have his book here because that's not real birding." So it's really interesting how people think that they're really quite amazing, and some of those people, when you actually talk to them, are not. They pretend they know a lot, but in reality they do. Which kind of leads me back. Should I say reality? They don't know a lot. But what I want to ask you again now is, in your life, have you come across people who profess to be birders, but in reality are not really connected to nature.
Yeah, I think there is some of that whole it's all about the gear, or it's all about the list, or it's all about whatever it might be. So obviously you come across people like that, I think, which is it's a bit of a worry, I suppose. Yeah, that the connection thing is different. There's definitely, as you know, the whole listing thing, which is how I got back into it in a way. For me, it was a way of keeping myself going. The number of things that projects I'd started in my life and just lost enthusiasm because I didn't have a goal. So when I was back into it, and also writing the previous book about it, thought this is something to give myself a target. Interestingly, since then, I've listed much less. I record things, but I don't keep a tally, and I know you do. That's fine, and I'd be happy for people to keep tallies as as much as they want. There's a broad church, but it's much less of a driving factor than it might have been in that first year where I've got to get to 200. So I think the people who profess to know a lot and maybe don't necessarily all that much, that occurs in all fields. I've encountered in music. Dare I say it, my job as a conductor is open to people kind of blagging their way through it like that, because you don't actually play any of the instruments. You're trying, like a manager, you're trying to enable the group. And I think that this thing of valuing the acquisition of knowledge just for knowledge's sake is a dangerous road as well. Because for me, what it's about is that love of it, is enthusiasm. And it doesn't matter how much you know, and it doesn't matter where you are or who you are. It's there. It's for everybody. And crucially, the thing that I've concluded, we are part of it. We are absolutely there with all the other creatures, and we're related to them as well. Go way back. We've all come from the same thing. We're all space dust, and we all go back to being space dust. And the more that we have that separation, then the less chance there is. So we have to include it, not just include people, but see the natural world as the same as us. We're the ones that have survived, along with all these other things. So
it's a shame that people feel the need to have to try and prove points, really, or point score. I mean, in my life, because I've set myself in a certain way, it means that people will try and shoot you down. Of course, people will try and question your knowledge. I remember once taking a group of people around South London, around a park, and I was told the day before, oh, by the way, this is blah blah's park, patch even, and he may turn up and he might be a bit sort of weird about it. I said, fine. So the following day, I'm leading the tour, and the guy turns up, and he's sniping the whole time. And at one point, I pointed out a sparrowhawk, and then he said, David, can you tell these people what happens when a sparrowhawk catches its prey? And I said,
the prey dies.
I said, you know what? That's a really good idea. John, in fact, everyone, John's going to tell you how what happens. And of course, he was embarrassed. Well, the sparrowhawk just puts his wings out of this prey, and then he shuts up after that. And I'm thinking, what was the point of that? What was the point? And it does come down to human, our sort of humanness, I suppose, in many ways, a negative side of humanness, which is a shame, because you come into this whole thing of nature thinking that everyone's great and everyone loves nature, so everyone should love each other. But there are so many egos. I mean, not even so much on the field, but also in the hierarchy, for inverted commas. You go up in these NGOs even, and you get people who are so territorial, who are so kind of, I know more than you do, so don't tell me anything.
I'm going to give you a great counterexample of the way I think it should be done. I write in the book, near the end of the book, I spent a week on Skocum Island in Pembrokeshire, which I'm sure have you been to Skocum and Skoma? I was just off, they're great manx water and storm petrel havens. So Skocum, you have to stay there for a week. The boat drops you off on the Saturday and picks you up the next Saturday. So the two wardens there, Richard and Giselle, they have, obviously it's an observatory, so they're ringing birds, and they have long-term volunteers who are young, aspiring professional conservationists. And I observed Richard giving a ringing demonstration, but also leading one of the long-term volunteers through the process, which they were already getting very good at. But it was an identification thing, and it was trying to age and sex the bird in the hand, whatever it was, as willow warbler said, and doing that examination of the feathers and all of that sort of stuff. And it just waited while they did it, and asked a couple of questions and said, so what do you think? And the guy said, well, I think this. And so Richard just gently said, okay, why? And they carried on. And at one point, the student said, I don't know. And Richard said, that's the right answer. You're allowed to say, I don't know. And he said, actually, I don't know either, because I, for whatever reasons, got technical at that point. And I thought, what a brilliant way of teaching, to show your own vulnerability and to say, I don't know is an acceptable answer. Let's find out. Yeah. Because if you're always, and I think this is something I used to do an awful lot when I was a young, this ties into music, when I was a young conductor, I wanted to come across as all-knowing, because there is that thing of the conductor being the boss, there and all puffed up. And so the trouble is you come across as very arrogant when you do that. So as I've done it more and more over 30 years, and I've got, I hope, better at it, I've got, I think, a lot more open to saying, actually, I don't know whether this is the right speed to play this piece, but let's try it, and then we'll try it again slower, and let's see what we think. Or if the principal violinist says, what do you want us to do there? And I go, I don't know, you're the violinist. So you're the one playing it, so you'll have a better handle on it. So that, I think that's really important, to be able to say, okay, I don't know, well, let's find out.
No, it is important.
No,
it's important, because you can't, not everyone knows everything, and people that do say they know everything will know. When it comes to birding, for example, I know one or two people who say that they can recognize 99% of the things they see. I think they're lying.
Yeah.
Because that's impossible. But, if you're trying to then encourage someone new, then that's not going to work, because that person will think, I'm never going to get to that stage, so I might as well forget it now.
And it's much more open. It's much more, okay, I could do that. I take heart from that. I take from, if he doesn't know, she doesn't know, and she's a real expert, then, maybe there's hope for us yet, and I'll keep on doing it, rather than going, as you say, I'll never get to that stage, and they're all a bit forbidding. So,
yeah.
Okay,
Zoomers.
Hello, Zoomers.
Have you any questions here for the lovely Lev? Because I know there's a whole sort of conversation going on in the chat, but I wondered if...
I can see the notifications piling up. I don't want to be distracted by them.
William's waving, so he might have a question.
Hi, William.
Hi.
Hi, William.
Thank you. Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Thanks, both of you. Fascinating hour. Went really quickly. My burning question for Lev is, what does it feel like to hold a storm petrel in your hand?
So you've read the book then?
Read the book.
Or you've got to chapter, whatever it is, chapter 10, I think.
I finished it earlier today, actually.
Oh, lovely.
Really...
Thank you so much for being an early adopter of it. And it's only been out a week, just over a week. Anyway, I'm just going to, what William's referring to, if I'll just find the bit in the book, just to read you the very beginning of chapter 10, isn't it? So chapter 10 is Getting Away from It All. The subtitle is In Which Our Author Goes to the Margins of Land and Sea, Gets Up Close and Personal with Amazing Creatures, and Falls in with a Band of Excellent People. And the first line is, I'm 54 years old and I've never held a storm petrel. What the hell have I been doing with my life? This came from the same visit to Skocum, and it was Richard and actually it was himself who gave me the storm petrel to release. They are astonishing birds, aren't they? I've always, from my books, you know how the illustrations in the books are pretty much all the same size. So a blue tit illustration might look the same size as a golden eagle illustration, on the page. And I always thought the storm petrel as a kid, as being quite a big bird, gannet sized or something. Because I never read the stuff, I just looked at the pictures and the distribution maps. And so then when I grew up and I came back to it, I went, they're tiny. They're like the size of a house martin. And you think of them pattering, just the smallness of the bird, and then the vastness of the ocean and how they live there. The thing that I took away from that is there's a smell to them. There's a sort of petrol-y smell. It's a kind of musty, smoky, can't quite describe it, but it's everything good. It's just wonderful. David, you probably find better words than me to describe the smell of a storm petrel, but it's something special. And especially when you feel it not being scared, or not apparently scared, it's not struggling to get away, and then letting it go and thinking, okay, so in a day's time you're going to be way out there in your natural habitat of the vast ocean. So I think that kind of connection is really memorable. Does that answer it?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, great.
Thank you very much, William. It's interesting with storm petrels to think that they are miniature albatrosses, effectively.
Yeah.
It's just amazing.
Their little noses, their little thing. Well, they showed on the tour of Skocum. One of Richard's party tricks is to just grab a Lancashire water chicken out of the burrow and show it in its big sort of the Hoover bag contents, but also take a storm petrel chick. And my son was with us, and we got a photo of Ollie holding this storm petrel chick, and its tiny nose already full. So yeah, they are massively endearing and fascinating, just extraordinary creatures.
Okay, which leads me neatly on to the next question I want to ask you, which is, what is your favourite bird?
Oh, right, I get asked this quite a lot. So definitely the goldcrest.
Really? What's that?
No, except the swifts are the best, aren't they? But hold on, I saw a kingfisher today, and that's the best bird. And there were sand martins as well. Have I got to give one? Have I just got to give one?
Well, you've given several, haven't you? So that's
I have. I know. I've already cheated. Gulls are quite good as well. I always say goldcrest because it was a very special bird to me as a kid. And this is a real sort of sob story because I was the smallest boy in my year. I was the smallest child in my year at school. I was a real titch. And so something about the goldcrest and firecrest being the smallest birds in Europe struck a chord with me. And then when I eventually saw one when I was about 11 or 12 in the garden, and it kind of looked at me with that thing they do with that little look there, and quite direct, and the crest and so that stuck with me. And then when I then saw one again sort of 35 years later when I came back to it, these are sort of memorable sightings. So the answer I always give is goldcrest. It's there's so many.
Okay, and the other question I need to ask you is, if you could be anywhere on this planet, notwithstanding the current pandemic, where would you be right now?
Well, it's soppy to say it, but we are, as I say, on the Isle of Wight at the moment, and it's a lovely spot. We come here quite often, and I can see from the terrace of where we're staying, I can see out over to sea. And if I use my telescope, I can occasionally see gannets going across and gulls across the sea. And there's a rookery behind behind the house, and my family are with me. So where we are is great. I do love our home in South London, but if it were one place that I haven't visited, and I think that some people have said this before recently, it would be Costa Rica. The biodiversity there is really something that I yearn to see. So let's say Costa Rica, shall we?
I mean,
again,
Costa Rica's, if I was to do a survey of all the people I've had on in conservation with, comes up the most. I've never been to Costa Rica. I've been invited 5 times. And all 5 times, in fact, the 5th time I actually turned it down because it was a bird race. And I thought, I'm not going to experience a whole new country racing around. Forget it. So I turned it down. So I've yet to actually turn up on the shores of Costa Rica.
I'm going to broaden it out a little bit. Then the answer to say, I'm going to say anywhere where there are hummingbirds. So
that's basically Americas.
Yeah, okay. But especially Southern Americas, I guess. You know,
yeah.
I'd love to spend some time with hummingbirds. Put it that way.
Yeah, they're great birds. Absolutely. I mean, some people in the chat were talking about how difficult peeps or sandpipers are to. In fact, it was actually Joe Seal talking about how difficult they are to ID. But I think hummingbirds, especially when they're in their female plumage or the males aren't in their bright sort of classic breeding plumage, they're one of the toughest birds to ID.
Yeah.
Anyway, I just want to quickly tell everyone that we've got a couple weeks left of the In Conservation with series, the current series, and then we're going to kind of call it a day until the autumn. So we've got a guy called Robert Oates coming on Thursday who is going to be talking to us about getting senior birders travelling. So that'd be interesting. On Sunday, my good self talking about Extremadura in Spain, especially some of the spots that people may not necessarily visit if you've ever been there before. Monday the 27th, we've got Doug Tallamy, an American, who's going to talk about his vision for a grassroots approach to conservation. Thursday the 30th, we have Dominic Cousins. Everyone knows Dominic Cousins if you're from the UK. He's written about 100 books. He's also a bird guider, and he's going to be talking about Britain's garden birds. And we've got a couple of other people who haven't been scheduled in yet. We should have had tomorrow Polly Morgan, this artist who makes her art using dead animals, obviously. But she's not going to be around until August the 3rd now. So she's going to be coming back then, I've heard today. And we've also got another lady from Cleveland, Ohio. And she's going to be talking about birding in Cleveland, Ohio, and all the stuff she does in terms of all the outreach she does. So we'll get that online once we tie her down. So it just leaves me now to say it's been a really interesting conversation with you, Lev, and I think you're a very humble man actually saying you're not an expert, because you seem to speak quite expertly to me. You could have totally talked to me.
That is 30 years of being a conductor and blagging it in front of a large room full of people, honestly.
Well, thank you so much. And also I must thank the Zoomers, the ever-present Zoomers, for being here tonight.
Yes,
really lovely seeing you guys as ever. I want to explore some of the questions and comments in the after show bit. But until then, I want to say thank you again to all of you. Look after yourselves, and don't forget to keep looking up.